Show notes, what are they?
That's what it's doing.
What's doing?
Right. This might make it into the show because it's really irritating me, and it's been irritating me for a while.
Oh, here we go again.
Brace yourselves for Sam complaining about technology. I, instead of a mouse, use a Wacom tablet. I have like an Intuos something or other. I don't know what. If people care, I'll put the specific thing that I have in the show notes. But
oh, people care.
I use it instead of a mouse because I get RSI, and using a mouse just hurts a lot, so I don't do it anymore. Until a little while ago, Wacom updated the driver for the tablet, and it changed some key behaviours around scrolling. Okay. So the way that it used to work is, so the pen I'm holding has a little button on the side of it, and I can press that button with my thumb, and then I can drag the pen over the surface of the tablet, and I can basically use it as a virtual finger on a virtual touchscreen, right? And I can scroll like that. So I'd sort of grab the page or whatever at the bottom, and then I would move it up, just like on a touchscreen, right? That's how scrolling worked, and the cursor, like the actual cursor on screen, would move with the pen, obviously. So it would be roughly stuck to whatever I clicked on to begin with to start the scroll, and it would scroll up or down. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense.
Okay. So, and that was the same on Windows and macOS, and it's important that it's the same on both those things because I use macOS at work and Windows at home, and if they're different, it screws me up. So, like for basic types of interactions, I want them to be as similar as possible, and basic interactions includes scrolling. If that's different on the platforms, it's a nightmare. So, a little while ago, Wacom's driver updated, and it changed the way scrolling works. Now, in the key change is that when you press the button and then put the problem that they're trying to solve with the change they've made is that as the mouse moves, the scroll events get sent to different parts of the screen, right? So for big windows like browsers and stuff, that doesn't matter because the scroll target is the entire page, and it doesn't matter where the mouse is within that page for the scroll events to get to it, if that makes sense. But for other applications, things like the Adobe suite of applications or any of that kind of like professional creative type stuff.
Which I'm guessing is something that a lot of people who are using this hardware are using.
Yep. Then the scroll targets can be quite small. One of the shortcuts you can do is that you can like hover your mouse over a number, for example, and then scroll up and down, and the number will change up or down, right? And the problem with that is that if you're using a Wacom tablet and you try and scroll, you start the scroll over the number that you're trying to change, but then your mouse moves, and then your mouse is no longer over the number, which means you're no longer scrolling the number up and down.
Mm-hmm.
So what they've done to solve this, and it makes sense, and it's a perfectly fine change, is that the mouse will stay exactly where it is while you're scrolling. So most of the time, the mouse and the pen are like completely in sync. It's an absolute positioning system. But when you start scrolling, the mouse will stay put, your pen will move, and then as soon as you lift your pen up, the mouse will then jump to wherever your pen is. And that's a bit weird to begin with, but you get used to it and it's fine. And that's how it works on macOS, largely. And you can scroll left and right, up and down. You can pan and scroll all over the place, and it works really well. Like, macOS has great support for this kind of scrolling up, down, left and right. Windows, less so. Okay, so key difference the first between the two platforms. On macOS, you can hover. So with a Wacom tablet, you can like hover the pen over the surface, and that moves the mouse without clicking anything. And then when you press the button to start scrolling, the mouse keeps moving until the pen touches the surface of the tablet, and then that's when the mouse freezes. Okay. On Windows, the mouse freezes as soon as you press the button. So if you're hovering over it and then you press the button a little early, the mouse will stop moving a little sooner than you expect it to. And I don't particularly mind which of those behaviours they go with. It's just annoying that it's different between the two platforms.
That sounds like it should just be a configurable option for the user.
Oh, it should be, but it isn't. It's just the way that it works. So that's difference the first, which is irritating but tolerable. The thing that's far more irritating is that on Windows, which doesn't seem to have quite the same level of support for scrolling left and right as macOS does, the way that Wacom have decided to work around this is that the pen will send scroll events, like simulate a mouse scroll wheel, up and down for going up and down, but it will press It will simulate pressing arrow keys on a keyboard left and right for left and right scrolling.
What?
Yeah, which I have only just figured out because, and more annoyingly, it does it in the reverse to what you expect. So if I scroll left with the pen, it sends right arrow keys, and if I scroll left, it sends if I scroll left, it sends right arrow keys, and if I scroll right, it sends left arrow keys. And I cannot change that, and it's maddening. Now, what this means is that if I am in, for example, my this Google Doc here, and I scroll up and down, because I cannot go perfectly perpendicular, I cannot go perfectly in the y-axis. There's always some left to right movement. It means that my editing cursor moves all over the place as I'm trying to scroll, which is really irritating. More annoying is that on YouTube, the left and right arrow keys like scrub through the video. So I cannot scroll a YouTube page without the video scrubbing left and right. And it is infuriating and I hate it.
I kind of don't want them to fix this.
What's more annoying is that on the Mac, I have choices about what scroll events get sent. I can choose if the scroll thing just does vertical scroll or if it does pan and scroll, okay? But on Windows, my only choice is pan and scroll, which means I cannot, as far as I'm aware, stop it from sending the arrow keys. And it's just insane. And I don't know why they've done this. And just please, just let me make it just scroll vertically. I don't care about panning. Just let me do scroll.
I mean, the one item that really facilitated the whole build of Hello There was a little square. Just put that on your little tablet thing. Just work up and down that.
Yes, have a little set square to let me know what vertical is. It's just...
The answer to this issue is clearly more hardware.
Yeah, well, the answer to this issue is don't have RSI and use a mouse. But anyway, complaint over.
Have you tried that?
Yeah, have I tried being healthy?
Does this conclude First World Problems with Sam?
This concludes Sam Complains About Technology, yes.
Would you like to slickly segue into talking about YouTube, seeing as we're kind of there already?
Sure, we can start out with some YouTube news. I'm only vaguely aware of what's been going on, and I assume you're a bit more up to date. So would you like to explain what's happening?
So basically, you were right about everything. YouTube is a terrible place and no one should put their content there because it may or may not get flagged as animal cruelty. Now, this is classic Spinnerproof. It's yesterday's news next week because this is now all happened and seemingly resolved, but it was really fun while it lasted. And that is that quite a few teams and builders found that they were having videos of fights removed and receiving lovely emails chastising them for the animal cruelty that they they contained. Hard to know the scale of it, but a lot of videos were lost. They've now all been reinstated. When YouTube looked at them and went, hang on a minute, this is robots. Because, they actually put a human on the job for once. But this could so easily have never gone resolved.
Well, I assume that this was YouTube's AI going wrong, and an example of why you shouldn't put machine learning in charge of anything.
Pretty much, yeah. Although it's weird. I've sort of had a chance to look at some of the sort of patterns in it, and there are no patterns. It'd be really easy to assume that it's picking up fights where, maybe the robot has an animal-based name, or where it's listed as a beetle weight fight, for example. You'd understand if all of the videos had that link, but they don't. It seems more like whatever is doing this has gone through, found a video on someone's channel that for whatever reason it didn't like, and then maybe looked at the rest of the channel is the only pattern you can really see, because individuals have been hit for multiple videos, whereas lots of people haven't been hit at all. It's just all very strange, and again, while it's all been resolved quite quickly, it's that fear that it could so easily not have been.
So this is one of the really sort of scary things about machine learning and any form of artificial intelligence, which is that fundamentally we don't understand how it works. Like, no human understands how any form of machine learning actually works. Like, we know how to sort of make the system and we can set the system up, and then you train the model, but you don't know what signals, you don't know with certainty which signals are important to that model anymore. Like, you don't, and which makes it really hard to debug. You can't say, you've categorized this video as animal cruelty. Why have you done that? Like, there's no way of sort of reversing that and saying, well, it figured out these things. And it's especially more complicated when it's doing things that are probably more advanced than just looking at the title of the video and stuff. Like, I would imagine it's doing a lot of computer vision on the video as well. Like, it will be analyzing the frames of the video, and God knows what it's using to try and understand that. Like, computers don't see in the way that humans do. And so it's this fundamentally ununderstandable thing that's in charge of people's livelihoods, which I think is quite scary. But more scary than that is that these kinds of systems are being used to decide things like insurance rates. And I think in America, they're trialing systems, and possibly in other places in the world, they're trialing these systems to try and identify high-risk crime areas as well, and also make decisions about whether or not people are guilty of things. And like, there's these machines that are potentially in charge of people doing hard time in prison. And these machines regularly go wrong. We have so many examples of all this machine learning stuff going wrong and not doing what it's meant to, and we don't know why, we don't understand it, and it is increasingly in charge of these really important systems. And obviously there are like militaries all over the world that are going to potentially like starting to use this for warfare as well, which is utterly terrifying.
This is turning into a Noel Sharkey tweet already.
Noel Sharkey is right. Like, machine learning needs to be seriously carefully looked at, because it's all being developed by... This is not going to be fair. A lot of it is being developed by one group of people in America, in Silicon Valley, basically. Like, and that has a whole bunch of problems associated with it. And it's also being developed without a lot of oversight. It's this really... People mistakenly think that because a computer is a computer, it can't be biased. But any machine learning system will get the bias of the people that trained it. It's just going to happen, because there will be biases that are introduced from the training data that you use, and from all kinds of other stuff. And the computer will pick it up, and then you go, oh, this is infallible. It's a computer. It can't possibly be biased in any way. But they are, based on who developed them. And it just... it needs to be much... You need to consider using machine learning much more carefully.
I did not expect this to go this deep this fast, and I really should have seen it coming. Because I was all prepared with a different rant entirely about how YouTube makes it sound like a person is doing it when it's not, and this now seems way more important.
I mean, YouTube getting it wrong is important. Like I said, this has the potential to affect people's livelihoods. Like, people make a living producing content for YouTube, and then YouTube will just seemingly at random demonetize people. And then there's no recourse for that. And the thing is, like, if you get demonetized just after you release a video, you lose all of that money. Like, the majority of your views happen in the first, 24, 48 hours. And if something in the algorithm either demonetizes you or doesn't promote it properly or whatever, if it doesn't do what it's meant to do, that's gone. Like, you're never going to get that money back. And it's scary, and it's a big part of you. I mean, you opened this by saying, like, Sam was right and you shouldn't put any content on YouTube, and that's a bit of an exaggeration in my position, but like, it is a big part of why I don't trust YouTube for this kind of stuff. It's like, why Spinnerproof is hosted the way it is because it's like, well, no random AI is going to go and delete all of our podcasts. It's not going to happen. And
that's the thing. I think a lot of people kind of treat putting something on YouTube or putting a photo on Facebook as kind of permanently archiving it. But actually, had this continued and got worse, I would imagine there are a lot of fights, particularly older fights from sort of robo games, Combat's Cup, that sort of thing, where the version on YouTube could be the only copy of it. Yeah. And it would be really sad to lose all of that stuff.
Let me tell you all about a program called YouTube DL and introduce you to the Data Hoarders subreddit.
Are we about to sort of drop into the world of questionably legal practices?
I mean, data hoarding I don't think is questionably legal.
Is it unquestionably illegal?
I think you can hoard data.
Then I assume this is fine, but, having had this conversation, I'm no longer legally liable for what might get said.
I'm just saying that YouTube DL is a program that exists. That's just a fact. There's nothing illegal about it existing. I'm just saying it exists. And if you ever wanted to learn how to, archive and protect large amounts of data, then there's a subreddit for that as well. Also, it's just a fact. There's nothing illegal about that. It's just, a statement I'm going to make.
Facts. For now, they're legal.
Yeah, for the time being, it is perfectly legal to express facts. That is troublingly worrying. Troubling awful.
Troublingly worrying.
It's just, I mean, this is how troubling it is. I can't even speak. That's only half a joke.
Yeah, it's weird how you've said this so many times, and this is the first time I've actually cared about it. It's like, it's only bad when it's happening to you, but the wider consequences and the wider idea of it are scary.
Yeah.
And now I've got to do the whole podcast on a downer. Thanks for that, Sam.
Well, I think that we can maybe lift the mood up a little bit and talk briefly about RoboNerd.
Yes. What would you like to say about RoboNerd? The fact that I might not be able to go?
Well, okay,
Way to lift the mood, Sam.
So, RoboNerd is, what date is it going to be? It is the 31st of August, and Ryan and I are intending to be there. There is a small chance that it won't happen, or that Ryan won't be there. I'm intending to be there anyway. Way. But hopefully both of us will be there, and if you want to come and say hello, then... Well, if you see us there, say hello. I wouldn't suggest travelling large distances to do that, though.
What's an acceptable distance to travel to see us, Sam?
Well, like, if you were going to RoboNerd anyway, then it's fine. But if you're only going to see us, then that's weird, in my opinion.
So you're saying, like, across a car park is the maximum acceptable distance to say hi?
If you happen to see us there, then come say hi. And if you don't know what we look like, then just stand in the middle of the car park and scream something controversial about robots, and we'll come and find you.
I feel like a lot of people will come and find you. So, current plan is we're hoping to have Hello there ready to go.
Yeah.
Hopefully in a spoiler-free state.
Well, I will say this about Hello There, which is that it has done more than just compete in Bugglebots, and any damage you think you might see on it is not necessarily representative of its performance in Bugglebots.
That is genuinely true and fair. Split Decision, I assume, is already ready to go?
Yeah, that is absolutely fine to be there as well. Again, any damage you think you may see on there is not necessarily indicative of its performance at Bugglebots.
And then I have a half-finished Tropical Storm Phil,
Ooh.
which has spent its whole summer being played with by children and somehow survived, that I intend to have finished by the time it comes around.
Cool.
So yeah, 3 robots. Ooh, proper team now.
None of which are waterproof, so we won't be taking part in the boat thing, I'm afraid.
I mean, I do have a rubber duck sat next to me that I've been meaning to do something with. I just wouldn't know where to start.
I don't even know how to make it waterproof and still be able to propel itself through water.
Waterproof servos are a thing. As is hot glue.
As is, yeah, mountains and mountains of hot glue.
Make an entire robot out of hot glue. It's basically 3D printing. That's all I'm saying.
I might actually try that.
I mean, if you have the time to get some kit in to try something, then I will happily watch you fail.
Have I got? Can't remember if I have any like N20 gear motors, or are they in the foam core model of Jellyfish?
I think I currently have them, and I think they're currently part of Tropical Storm Phil.
Oh, okay. Well, that's fine then. Well, we'll be there with some robots.
Yep, and hopefully some more stickers as well, because I'm now a sticker fiend. It's happened.
Are they going to be of our new logo or the sort of...
New logo.
Okay.
And possibly some slightly more retro ones as well, which are still basically the new logo.
Yeah.
But yeah, RoboNerd. I wasn't expecting to talk about it, but I'm glad that we have.
Well, because last year we just sort of did like a really weird bonus episode that we didn't advertise very much, saying that we're going to be there. So this year, I thought we'll make it a bit more clear that we're planning to be there.
Good idea. On to the next thing that isn't BattleBots. Robot Champions. Man, this is a lot of front matter.
There's a lot to go through. So Robot Champions is a game that I first came across at Bugglebots. One of the people responsible, Andrew, was there. They had like a stall thing, I don't know what you'd call it, but they had a copy of Robot Champions there, and I played it a bit and it was quite good fun. Andrew very kindly gave me like an early copy of an alpha, and Ryan and I played it together and had a lot of fun playing it, and there is now a publicly accessible free download of a demo of the game, and you should go and download this free demo because it is free and it is a good game, and I think people might enjoy it. And I'm also just going to state, for the record, they are currently running a Kickstarter for funding for a full release at some point next year.
Listen to you holding back on your opinions on Kickstarter.
Look, it's a statement of fact, and that's fine.
I mean, I'm willing to go a little further than you in talking about this, in that I did not expect to enjoy this game, but it's been a ton of fun, especially multiplayer.
Yeah.
It's not like other robot fighting games. It's not aiming for realism. It's a lot more on the arcadey side. But the game physics have a really good feel to them. Things still feel quite meaty and satisfying. And they've clearly worked very hard on sort of capturing the essence of all the different weapon types that they're using and then dialing them up to be stupid and arcadey.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of it. It runs on my laptop, which most things don't. Admittedly on lower settings, but it gets it there. And for the money they're asking for on Kickstarter, I honestly think it's already basically worth that. I would pay for this game in its current state.
Yeah, it is a genuinely a really good game. Like Ryan said, it's arcadey, but it is very satisfying. And I think they've done a really good job of balancing all the different weapon types against each other. Like when we've been playing it together, there's not felt like there's a particular one of the robots that is guaranteed to win. Like any robot can beat any other robot, which I think is quite cool. And I suspect difficult to do given the various types of weapon there are. But yeah, it's a good game. It reminds me a lot of Rocket League.
Yes. Although I've never played Rocket League, I've seen it played.
Well, Rocket League is also good. And if you enjoyed that, then I think you will enjoy Robot Champions.
If you like smashing stuff up, you're going to like it. And if you don't like smashing stuff up, what are you doing here?
Yeah. Links will be in the show notes for both the Steam page and the Kickstarter if you're interested in such things.
Beautiful. Final very quick thing, hopping back to YouTube for a second. Although it is at least actual BattleBot stuff. They've put up some individual fights from the Remars event. And they're interesting.
Yeah. I don't think we're going to say anything particularly sort of unique or groundbreaking here, but cutting to a shot containing someone else filming the event during a critical moment in the fight and missing the big hit just seems insane to me. Why is that edited the way that it is?
They've also, in places, added the terrible sound effects and then left the sound alone in others.
Oh, man.
But my favourite thing of all is that they've managed to take what was an event with 3 commentators and completely remove one of them. There's like one time where that third commentator appears in a shot, but I swear there are times they've artificially dimmed the lighting where she sat just to make it look like it was just Chris and Kenny.
That is... I wonder what the reason... I wonder if there's some kind of like content licensing sort of like you can't use my appearance in these contexts type things, or if they've just decided that people won't understand if there's someone that's not Kenny or Chris there.
I think they mostly want these to look as much like the stuff in the show as possible.
Yeah.
Which is interesting in itself, because this does show that if they did more live events, we could get some really good edited content out of them.
Yeah.
You know, stuff that is basically on par with the show as it is broadcast. The fact that there are parts of the show being recreated that we don't like is completely aside from anything. It shows that they get exactly the footage they want out of these events.
Yeah, they've shown that there is the potential for good edits of these fights to exist. They've utterly failed to deliver on that, but they've shown that it's possible, which makes it more irritating, I think, that they've done this.
I mean, I've been watching this series of King of Bots. I feel like I am now inoculated against annoyance at editing.
I don't think that could ever happen to me.
I mean, it's a good job you're not watching King of Bots, that's all I'm saying. The other thing that I'm really loving with these videos is the titles. They're going pretty heavy on the caps lock, shout something vague titles. Like, you won't see this on TV!
Yeah, what was the title of the one that you linked in the show notes? Close your eyes, this fight is too painful to watch. Ah, so awful.
I've gone to great pains at times to point out that the people who run the event aren't completely the same people as make the show. Mm-hmm. But in this case, you feel like it is the BattleBots people doing this rather than the external production company they're attached to.
Yeah, I'm just looking at these titles, man. This is proper like classic YouTube title. This is the only thing they're missing is the YouTube thumbnails.
Is there anything sadder than a clickbait title with a disappointing amount of views?
We mounted a GoPro on a BattleBot. Here's what happened. ...
Please, BattleBots, just stop.
Oh dear.
Just give us the content with a sensible title. Build it and they will come.
Well, so I'm going to...
Or it will get deleted for animal cruelty. We just don't know anymore.
I'm just going to advocate the other side, which is that on YouTube, this stuff makes a difference. Like, having these titles and having those thumbnails makes a difference, because you're not... If you're subscribed to a YouTube channel, the algorithm doesn't care anymore. Like, it just doesn't matter if you're subscribed. It just takes that as a hint that you might like to see those videos. My understanding of YouTube, from like what I've heard professional YouTubers saying, is that the vast majority of their views on their videos come from people who are not subscribed to the channel. And I think the reason for that is entirely dictated by the algorithm, and people don't go to the subscriptions page on YouTube. I think they just go to the home page on YouTube, and that's different. And the home page is entirely algorithmic. And I think even the subscriptions page is somewhat algorithmic. I don't know. I don't think mine is, because
Could you subscribe to basically nothing?
Well, no, because I'm subscribed to a bunch of people, but I've never hit the bell on any of them and stuff. So I just sort of think my feeling is that if I don't touch anything, hopefully my subscription feed will always just remain a chronological order of videos that have been uploaded. But I suspect that's not true. I suspect that YouTube have missed videos that for channels that I don't watch all that much. But the homepage is worse. It's just entirely algorithmic. And in that box, I think, if you just have a boring, Duck versus Gigabyte title and that's all you say, most people aren't necessarily going to know what that is. You need a different title that is more enticing to do well. And as much as I hate these clickbait titles and as much as I hate clickbait thumbnails, I also want BattleBots to be a thing that continues to exist. And if they can get good engagement on YouTube by playing that game, then so be it.
I agree with you. I just don't want to.
Oh yeah, I hate the fact that this is the way it works. I really don't like that that's the system that's in place. I don't like the algorithm for a lot of reasons. I don't like the algorithm, but yeah, I want BattleBots to do well in general. So here we are.
Is this the time that we finally do a really clickbait title?
I mean, we've done.
You won't believe what these two people think.
What's the most clickbaity one we've done? I think that the worst episode of the reboot or best episode of the reboot are probably the most clickbaity things I can think that we've done.
But they work together so beautifully. Not that we knew that when we made the first one. They work together so beautifully.
No, it was always planned. Let me look down. Yeah, I mean, we don't really do clickbaity stuff very much. I think those are probably the episode 29.mp3. Oh, this is getting very self-serving.
The least clickbait title.
That's my favourite title. Yeah, I think that those are the most clickbaity ones. Maybe we should do a "You won't believe what happened" or "We strapped a GoPro to whatever."
I mean, we could do that at RoboNerd, to be fair.
Maybe that'll be the title of I might try and make a vlog of that again, and maybe that'll be the title. We strapped a GoPro to my head. Here's what happened, and then it's just like a 20-minute video of the day.
We strapped a GoPro to a robot builder, and you won't believe what happened.
Oh dear.
Coming up next, we actually talk about BattleBots, and you won't believe what happens.
Oh dear. We should probably talk about BattleBots, really, shouldn't we?
We're not half an hour in already. Right, so we're a little bit on the behind side, but that's fine. We're going to catch it all up today.
Well, we sort of are and we aren't. So we're just going to do episodes 9 and 10 today, and then we will consider ourselves caught up, and that'll just be it. But we're no further behind than we are normally. We normally end up 2 episodes behind, and then we do an episode. So we're back to normal.
I forgot this is our normal now.
Yeah.
Well, let's get going then with a little bit of Huge versus Gigabytes.
Yes.
I thought you were going to give us a huge, but...
Sorry. Huge versus Gigabyte.
You could have gone longer.
I genuinely don't think I could. That was about as much as I could do.
I just want to be your neighbour in that moment.
Did you enjoy this fight?
Yes, absolutely. I enjoy literally every fight that Huge wins And some of the ones it loses. There is nothing I enjoy more than watching that ungainly freak do so well. It just sustains me in every possible way.
Yeah, they had some good tactics in this fight with the length of the bar that they spent great amount of time sort of like planning to make sure it was just the perfect length, and also by running the spinner in the opposite direction, so they're hitting down on Gigabyte rather than just glancing off their armor.
This is the real surprise of Huge this season. Last season, it was, it's a really weird design that no one has a plan for. And also a really well-made robot, obviously. And because of that, it did quite well. It did very well. This season, it's no longer such a surprise package. And you feel like people are starting to develop ideas about how to beat it. So they've started making it super configurable. Which means that people are coming in against a robot that they already only really have half a plan for, and then they've got to anticipate what Huge's plan is as well.
Because they've got configuration in terms of the wheels that they use, both in, I think, the diameter of the wheels, as well as like how strong those wheels are, as well as how long their weapon bar is. And they seem to have quite a lot of choice as well. It's not just like, we've got a long bar or a short bar. It's like we have a bunch of different bars that are like 2 inches different in length, and we're going to choose the exact right one.
Yeah, that image they showed seemed to be sort of implying they have 7 or 8 bars.
Yeah.
Which is mad.
Yeah. It's cool though. Like I think that's a good kind of configuration, I think, especially for something like Huge. I think that's a good way of doing the adaptive robot technique.
It's good because you're coming up to a fight against them. You don't know how big they're going to be. You don't know how high or low on your robot they're going to be hitting, and you also don't know what direction they're going to be spinning in. And that must make it really difficult if you're planning to adapt your robot to do anything genuinely meaningful.
Yeah, there's definitely a chicken and egg type thing going on there, isn't there? It's like, well, if we do this, they might do that. And then we've got to do this to counter that, but then they might do this. Yeah, it's a lot of cat and mouse is probably a better metaphor there.
And of course, in the case of Gigabyte, there's probably not a great deal they could have changed anyway.
Yeah,
I don't know if they still
Gigabyte.
have different shells, or I doubt they have any different tooth configurations. The only real choice I think they have is whether they're going to run the mask or not. But it must still affect, for example, your driving style going in.
Yeah. Well, it would if the Gigabyte team could drive their robot not into walls anyway.
That would be helpful.
That really confused me that happened. It was sort of like Gigabyte going into a wall is probably one of the worst things that can happen, and they just drove into the corner.
Yeah, they weren't even led there by Huge, really, were they? They just went, hey, this looks like a nice place to be.
Yeah, I mean, Huge was like, I feel like their choices were either thread the needle and get out of the corner without hitting Huge, or go through Huge, or go into the corner. And of the three, I think going into the corner is the worst. And I don't really get why it happened. I'm sort of assuming that it was either... I mean, so, once again, robots are much harder to drive than I think they are. So, like, I'm sure that it was not a choice that they made. I'm sure that they were just either just... You know, stuff happens. I don't know if they lost control of the robot or if they didn't quite know which direction it was pointing. I would imagine it's very hard to tell which way Gigabyte is facing, even with the mast, because that's quite a subtle tell, I would imagine, in the grand scheme of things. So, like, all these things. But it's a shame that it happened. I'd
be interested to know just how difficult Gigabyte is to control in general as well. Because when you're spinning up, for example, that must really affect the driving.
Yeah.
And the wheelbase looks a little bit weird. It's quite small wheels, so potentially the floor is affecting it as well. There might be a lot of factors there that make it easier or harder to control. But then again, it's not a robot that necessarily even needs to be all that aggressive, especially in this fight. It's like, the only really available game plan is to drive at Huge. The idea of trying to get around to a side or get around to the back doesn't seem like it has that much advantage.
Well... If they can get around to the side, then obviously they're hitting the wheels and they're not in as much danger of being hit by Huge's weapon as they would be if they just went into the middle of it. And there's also the wheels from the sides are the only things they can hit. Like, they obviously can't... If they just drive under Huge, which is what would happen if they just drove at the middle of it, there's a very high chance they'd lose their mast, which is not a good thing, TM. So I can sort of see that there's some element of like, we need to make sure we get around to the side and stuff. But And I guess maybe that's what they were trying to do a few times. They did seem overly cautious to me, though.
But they're hitting so low down. Their teeth are basically hitting at ground level. It's hard to imagine them doing any significant damage to the wheels. And if you're going in at that wheel, it's probably going to bend out of the way, or you're going to spin huge around so that it's coming at you anyway. I would have expected their game plan to be, let's see if we can break their bar. You know, break the spinner mechanism just by getting hit hard enough.
I think as matchups go, I think that Gigabyte is at a big disadvantage here, and if Gigabyte if Gigabyte had more armor on top, I would get the idea of we need to try and break Huge's weapon. But like, I suspect that Gigabyte knew that Huge had a weapon that was going in the other way and designed to hit them just on the top of their robot. And I suspect also that Gigabyte knew that they don't have a lot of armor up there. And if they had a different shell that had more armor, I would expect them to have expected them to use it. So I don't actually know what Gigabyte could meaningfully do here, because like you say, Gigabyte is tacking very low, and there's nothing on Huge that's going to do anything there. And I can totally understand why they're a bit hesitant to sort of go right into the middle.
Well, I'd say that rather than stopping and spinning up, you get in there as fast as you can. But instead, they seem to have a lot of faith in the idea of their weapon actually doing something in this fight, which turned out to be optimistic. Although I would say that I think they had their better period of the fight was after their weapon was broken, because they exhibited a lot more control.
Well, yeah, so they were forced to be... They were forced to drive in a different way, I think, and by not having their shell spinning, I suspect that they do have more control over their robot, and they were definitely, like, they were in control of the fight for basically the whole fight, I think, because Huge is a very slow, sort of lumbering robot in many ways. It's not the most nimble of things, and Gigabyte is definitely more maneuverable in those things, and yeah, they did a good job of controlling the fight once they lost their weapon and like getting Huge on the screws and stuff like that. They did well, but yeah, it's hard to imagine a way that they could have knocked Huge out, really.
Must admit, I was initially surprised to see them use the mast at all, because that seemed like it was just a nice big target for some very visible damage. But it was actually the one thing that allowed them to push Huge around.
Yeah.
And they still came kind of close to the KO just by getting Huge straddling the screws, which would have been a horrible way for the fight to end, but...
Am I right in thinking that Huge has, like, those light things that let it know which way is forwards and backwards as well as the mast?
Gigabyte does, yes.
Yeah, sorry, Gigabyte, yeah. So I would imagine that, like, the other advantage of the mast when the shell isn't spinning is that I would imagine that the mast is a much clearer indicator of which way is forwards when the shell isn't spinning, because the lights are going to be harder to see.
Oh yeah, but then again, they surely have, you know, some kind of system where if they're not putting a big tall mast on, surely they could be putting something lower profile on the top to just point forwards or point backwards. Because the main point of the mast being as it is to self-right, but this wasn't a fight where they were ever likely to get flipped.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we're overthinking it.
As if we would ever do that. I'm offended by the notion, Sam.
Apologies.
To Craig Danby.
Oh,
Dead
dear.
meme.
Keep it alive. Let's flog that dead horse.
This is kind of another instalment in the ever-growing book, Huge wins a judge's decision. This is their 5th win now overall. 4 of them have been by judge's decision. And the only KO was against Jasper.
What do you think that says about that robot then?
It's interesting because every judge's decision it's had, I think, has been really clearly in its favour.
Yeah.
So the Sub-Zero fight, the Chomp fight, the free shipping fight, and now this one. All fights that they were very clearly winning. And of the, I think it's 3 defeats they've had, all of them have been by KO, and 2 of them they finished in half. I'm worried it's starting to fall into the Witch Doctor zone in that respect, where it's got lots of really good wins against robots that were always going to find it hard to beat it, and it's been defeated exclusively by good robots. And in the Bite Force match, it was arguably winning when it did lose. So it's really hard to kind of judge their pedigree at this point.
Yeah, I think Huge is a very damaging robot that lacks the control to finish off their opponents, really. Like, I think they can do a lot of damage to their opponents, but because Huge is the sort of big lumbering thing that it is, I don't think they have the finesse and the control to sort of go and deliver the killing blows necessarily. Yeah,
I think they're good at doing damage, but not necessarily damage to anything critical. But again, that's partly a function of the fights that they've had. So Sub-Zero has always been a very durable bot where you can rip up the outside and the inside is fine. Free shipping was kind of similar. They did lots of damage to the structural stuff on top for the weapon, but you're realistically never going to kill that body. Chomp, similar as well. They did lots of damage to the weapon, but nothing really to the body where anything important was. Even the Jasper fight, it's hard to tell if they knocked it out or it just stopped. But they are amazingly good at controlling the flow of a fight, which, considering they're largely so immobile, is incredibly impressive.
Well, I think impressive might be a bit strong. I think it's a function of just the shape of Huge, in that there's not a lot of Huge that you can hit.
But the bit you can hit will happily immobilise it quite quickly if you hit it hard enough, as demonstrated by Son of Waiachi and Ice Wave.
Yeah, and the thing that both those robots have in common is a ridiculously powerful spinner. Like, I think for a lot of, if you've got anything other than a, overwhelmingly large horizontal spinner, I think Huge is just very difficult to kill. But I don't know I feel like it's a bit grand saying that that's very impressive of Huge. It's just sort of like a function of having a big plastic robot.
I think it's also a function of the matchups they've been given.
Yeah.
Because we haven't seen them against a moderately effective horizontal. So it's kind of hard to tell if the damage they took from both the Son of Waiachi fight and the Ice Wave fight was because of the other robot being an exceptional example of its weapon type, or just a fundamental difficulty that Huge is going to have. Because again, we always talk about the kind of rock, paper, scissors thing. And I think some people are weirdly tempted to take that incredibly literally. But in the rock, paper, scissors world of robot combat, where some designs just inherently have an advantage over others, that is a design they have a disadvantage against.
You can try and retroactively force this rock, paper, scissors thing as much as you like. I'm telling you that before last episode, you had never made this analogy to me before.
Don't make me go back through 53 episodes, Sam.
Do it. The burden is on you to prove that it happened.
I'm sure there will be listeners out there who've been annoyed by me saying it and can tell you that it definitely happened. Mobilise, listeners, mobilise.
Oh, dear.
Do my bidding. I now desperately want to see Huge in the top 16 again. Because A, good robot that really deserves it, and B, wildcard factor. Any of the favourites could come up against them and suddenly struggle.
I like how you compared Huge to Witch Doctor, which is a robot that you frequently sort of say you don't feel should be in the top 16, and now you're saying that Huge must be in the top 16.
I'm saying, or what I have been saying previously, is that Witch Doctor hasn't necessarily earned the reputation it had. And tenses are getting weird here because we're going to talk about this later. Whereas I think Huge does deserve the reputation it has. People like it for exactly what it is. A weird thing that works pretty well and wins fights. And I should point out that I'm fairly sure over its career, to date, not including the Remars event because timelines, fairly certain Huge has a better record than Witch Doctor at 5-3 here. I recall Witch Doctor's record being roughly evens.
I mean, that's my recollection as well.
I'll point out, I don't think that's a compelling argument at all because you're talking about Witch Doctor results from like 4 or 5 years ago. But it's an argument that I could make if I wanted to, as flawed as it is. Just making this weird power move of, hey, I got this argument I could use. Don't even need to, but I could.
Weird flex.
Yes, it is.
I think that Huge is quite likely to be in the top 16 at this point.
It's very selectable.
Yeah.
It's a vertical spinner that isn't another vertical spinner. And what more do the BattleBot Selection Committee really want?
I think they provide enough variety to the field that they will be there.
And they're a genuine fan favourite.
Yeah.
Because we all like weird stuff.
As opposed to those non-genuine fan favourites.
You're just baiting me, aren't you? Just baiting me every time.
Those fake fan favourites.
The spooky ones and the chompy ones.
Which robots are those again?
Should we move on to something that should be a fan favourite?
Sure. We have Sub-Zero versus P1.
I'm so sad that P1 doesn't actually seem to work very well.
Well, I mean, I think it worked very well. I just think Sub-Zero did quite well in this fight. Because, like, P1's weapon clearly worked. They self-righted with it, and it was, like, clearly functioning. I just don't think P1 ever got a chance to get far enough under Sub-Zero to actually do anything with it.
This is the point at which I realise you won't have seen their first fight.
Oh, okay.
So...
Did their first fight not happen on the Discovery broadcast of BattleBots?
No, and therefore it didn't happen. I know. I was getting to that. Don't you worry. So the BattleBot supporter thing has started doing something I was kind of worried and kind of hoping it would do, which is showing unaired fights.
Okay.
I still don't know how I feel about that. I'm really happy to see them, but I'm not sure I love the idea of them kind of being gated away behind a thing when they have some kind of genuine relevance to the season. And I hope that they at least get released publicly after it. But anyway, one of those fights was P1 versus Sidewinder, where P1 lost quite handily to Sidewinder.
Okay.
And that is the kind of fight you would expect it to do quite well in, because it is, to all intents and purposes, a wedge. And they got taken apart quite badly by that weapon. That, coupled with this performance, doesn't give me much faith in it as a competitive machine. I still love it. I still want it to do incredibly well. I want it to, somehow do a bombshell in some kind of last chance rumble and be the champion it deserves to be.
No.
Right, see, here's the thing. P1 has the underdog spirit now, because they referred to it as a reverse flipper. This is not a reverse flipper. Everything else is a reverse flipper. This is the one true direction for a flipper to flip in. And I will fight anyone who says otherwise.
What makes this the one true direction, then?
Cassius, obviously.
You need to move on, man. Get with the times.
No, for me, that is the genesis of the effective flipper. Or, arguably, Recyclops, also a front hinge. Because, in my world, America didn't exist prior to 1998. Or certainly robot combat in America didn't exist.
I mean, America didn't exist much before that anyway, in the grand scheme of things.
Very true.
I always laugh when I hear Americans talk about buildings that are 100 years old, as if that's impressive.
I mean, they do build everything out of tissue paper and hope.
Hopes and prayers. No, thoughts and prayers.
Oh, no. Move on. Pivot.
There's a political statement for you.
More of those coming later. And you don't know why. Okay, we'll get to that.
I don't know why. I'm nervous now.
But yeah, front hinges are the true flipper design. And that is why P1 should be granted access to the top 16 despite its record.
That is bull, and you know it.
But it's my kind of bull, Sam. It's my kind of bull.
You can't be going, I have decided that this robot that's not done very well should be in the top 16 just because it's got a particular type of weapon. It's not how this works.
I mean, it basically worked last year.
Oh, dear. Well, based purely on this fight, I don't feel that P1 was given a chance to show itself, so I can't really judge one way or the other. Aside from the fact that their spoiler fell off the back of their robot for absolutely no reason at the beginning of the fight, which makes no sense to me.
I think that's intended behaviour, because otherwise it could really get in the way.
Well, why put it on there?
Aesthetics, obviously. Aesthetics are very important. That's why they have the little sparks in the back as well. It's one of my favourite things on any robot ever. It's completely unnecessary mechanical and electronic complexity, and that's brilliant.
I like the sparks as well, but if you're going to have the aesthetic of having a spoiler, it's you need to commit to that. And what's it going to affect? Their flipper goes away from the spoiler. It's not going to be interfering with anything. What's the problem with having the spoiler there?
I don't know if they're meant to be semi-invertible, potentially. If, for example, they landed with the weapon open, I feel like the back wheels would make contact with the floor without the spoiler there.
Yeah, but they've got the flipper so they can self-right themselves.
If it's working.
You've
got to think about these fringe cases, Yeah,
but that's taking it too far. And if you're going to think about those fringe cases, then don't put the spoiler on there, because otherwise you're going to start every fight randomly falling apart for no reason.
Don't put the spoiler on there. Who do you think you're talking to?
What I'm saying...
Always put the spoiler on.
They should put the spoiler on. It should be there, but it should be there as a part of the robot, not some random little thing that's held on with a hair, It should be part of the robot and not just fall off immediately.
Okay, concept time. This isn't what they've done, but it's something they could do. The spoiler is a deployable mini-bot.
I would be in favour of that.
The one true cluster bot in modern battle bots.
That would be a cluster bot right there. That's fine.
It has to be able to attach itself after the fight, though.
Oh, I'm sure you could come up with a way of doing that with magnets or something.
Magnets, the answer to everything.
Yeah. The answer to all of life's problems.
The cause of and solution to. Yeah, going back to P1 not being as effective as we'd like, I think the biggest issue they've got is the issue that literally any proper flipper is going to have, which is that you've got to get right under an opponent to actually flip them.
Yeah.
Which they've made difficult for themselves by having a single wide wedge edge. If you think about something like Bronco, or I suppose more relevantly Sub-Zero, only the tip of their flipper has to be low to the ground.
Yep.
And it's easier to get a small thing low to the ground than the entirety of a wide thing, especially on this floor. And it looked at the start of the fight in particular when they were sat in their box that P1, their wedge is not even close to the floor. Which makes sense, because the floor has been screwing everything up for everyone, so you're not going to try and go in there super low down. You'd rather struggle to get under the opponent than struggle to drive around.
Yeah.
So I completely understand why they would do that, but that does completely new to them. Whereas if they were able to run sort of hinged forks, hinged wedgelets for stuff to then go up, they might have a little bit more of a chance. But that's not an easy thing to suddenly do on the fly when you realise that the floor is completely balked.
It's not just how low to the ground the front of their robot has to be. It's also that they need to have their opponent basically on top of them before they can flip them in any meaningful way, which I think that's partly a fundamental problem with front hinged flippers, because you can't have the hinge on the floor at the front of the robot, so there's always going to be a certain amount of like leading wedge that does nothing. But this I feel is like particularly kind of, they need to be fully under their opponent to flip them, whereas Sub-Zero and Bronco, they don't. They barely need to get under their opponent at all to throw them. So like, you may be saying that this is the canonical flipper or something, but like, it is, I think it is quite fundamentally flawed.
Oh yeah, front hinges are awful. That's exactly why more people should build them. Someone will make it work eventually. I should point out, I'm currently building a front hinge ant weight, so I'm fully aware of how terrible they are and how it's not going to work. Especially when built by me, of all people. I'm not the solution to this problem.
Oh, dear.
And I'm fully prepared to go to RoboNerd and not get under a single opponent to flip them. I'm braced for that internally.
I look forward to it.
But they're still the original and best flippers.
Have you got any words for Sub-Zero?
I have many words for Sub-Zero. I don't know if you maybe want to do your words first. Unless you too have many words.
I would just like to congratulate Sub-Zero. Like, I think they've had a tough run, and I think this is the first fight that I've seen them kind of like definitively win, and I'm genuinely like just really happy for them that they've been able to do this. This was really cool to see. I'm really glad that Sub-Zero worked this well, especially after how much they've had to rebuild. Like, this seemed like a very different robot to the Sub-Zero that we've seen before, and I'm glad that it was as effective as it was. And it may be that P1 is not the world's greatest robot, but nevertheless, well done, Team Sub-Zero.
This is that amazing moment where a team finally gets to go out and show their robot working as they designed it to work. And I think for Jerry Clarkin in particular, that's been a very long time coming. You know, he turned up to his first season, ABC Season 2, I think it was, with a robot that basically wasn't finished and immediately got fed to Ice Wave, which is no way to start your time in BattleBots. Last season, he sort of took on tough fights so willingly in terms of taking on Captain Shredderator, taking on Minotaur. This season did the same with Cobalt as well. Always happy to be the punching bag, and now finally getting to actually punch someone else. The punching badge punches back. Go Sub-Zero. And I kind of feel bad for being so unhappy with its design when I first saw it, because I felt it was basically a snub-nosed knockoff Bronco. But the more time I've had to sort of sit and look at it, the more I realise that I've defended so many wedge flippers for looking similar, because the wedge flipper is a design that you can't really vary that much. And I think this is the same with the style of flipper they're going with. There are a set of design constraints that stop you doing anything too out of the box. And actually, the tweaks they've made to it are all good tweaks. You know, the sort of the real key change, I suppose, is the shorter wheelbase compared to the likes of Bronco. And that works really well for them. All it's lacking is the insane flipping power that Bronco has, but I don't think they were necessarily going for that. And they've made something that does really work.
Yeah, and then they're also not lacking in flipping power. Like, they were throwing P1 reasonably high, and they did get them out of the arena and stuff. Like, and that's no mean feat. Like, these robots are heavy. Like, they've still got a powerful flipper.
And getting them out of the arena is all you really need to be competitively viable. It's nice to be able to throw them higher and make them break when they land, but your main reliable way of winning a fight is still to get them out.
What did you think of I think it was Chris insulting superfans in his commentary of this fight.
I did not notice that. Tell me more.
Near the beginning of the fight, he counted how many flips Sub-Zero had got off. He sort of said that's their third flip for those of you keeping track at home. And then he said something on the lines of, and if you are, then you seriously need help, I think is what he said, or something, words to that effect. And it made me laugh.
I mean, this from the people that counted the 50 plus hits of Shatter, or the 50 plus swings of Shatter, but couldn't be bothered doing the same for Blacksmith. You know what? You need us obsessives to keep you honest. Sort it out.
It just really cracked me up. And I thought of you in that moment, because I thought of all the people that I know, you are the most likely to be counting flips in a fight.
I mean, I totally haven't gone through footage of Hello There things and counted the amount of times we used our weapon. It's not the kind of thing I'd do. It's the kind of thing a weirdo would do.
That's the kind of thing that a person who seriously needs help would do.
See, I wasn't sure if he was saying that we needed help because that's an insane thing to do, or just needed help because we might lose count.
I mean, I
personally prefer my more charitable view there.
We could give him the charitable view, but, you know, where's the fun in that?
Well, I mean, if we were face-to-face, I think you'd give him the charitable view, wouldn't you?
No, what's he going to do to me?
Snap you like the twig you are.
I don't think I've ever been described as a twig. Why do they bother with the countouts when you get a robot out of the arena?
Because you're allowed to come back in if you can. If a robot goes out and can get back in, they're allowed to continue.
Has that ever happened in the history of BattleBots?
Not that I'm aware of, but you've got to be open to the possibility. Especially when it's a robot like a flipper that could potentially propel themselves back in.
Fair enough.
What I love is the countouts of a robot that's in like 4 pieces and on fire. I think that's more ridiculous. There is, I believe, a clause in the rules that they can forego the countout if it's blatantly obvious that the robot is not going to recover. But I think purely for TV, they love to do it anyway.
Yeah, fans of the unnecessary countdown.
Plus, the countdown gives you the great visual when you get a double KO and they both count it together. And who doesn't want that? In a moment of beautiful unity.
Speaking of double KO.
Oh, I did not realise I was doing that.
Up next, we have Nelly the Ellibot versus Deep Six.
So this is the kind of fight that I think we would usually ignore, but we're not ignoring it. That's not happening. That's not allowed.
But before we dive into the fight itself, the guy that's brought Deep Six, I'd just like to point out that he looks like to me anyway, looks like a weird cross between Elon Musk and Jimmy Fallon.
I'm just trying to work out if that's a compliment or not.
I mean, I think they're both reasonably handsome men, so, you know, it's not an insult, I'll tell you that.
Reasonably handsome, the compliment that every man lives for.
Well, you know, Elon Musk and Jimmy Fallon, neither of them are like Robert Downey Jr., for example, so, you know.
Again, is that a compliment or not? I can't tell with you. Are we talking young Robert Downey Jr. or modern Robert Downey Jr.? They're very different beasts.
They are. I mean, I quite like modern Robert Downey Jr. It feels weird saying his name in full every single time, but it also feels weird to just say Robert, so I don't know.
Rob DJ. I think Sam's Secret Man Crushes could become a whole spin-off of Spinnerproof. I'm looking forward to this.
I mean,
who else do you consider reasonably attractive?
There's nothing secret about any of this. I think it's so. I mean, I have a type here, right? Yeah, muscular men. Thumbs up from me.
And wealthy. Got to be wealthy.
And wealthy, it seems.
If only Jeff Bezos had been to the gym more.
Right, so modern Jeff Bezos is far more attractive than young Jeff Bezos.
I don't actually know what he looks like. I was just guessing that he was out of shape, I'll be honest.
Well, no, right. So, there's early pictures of him when he had, he just looked like a proper nerd, right? But, these days, he has hit the gym and he's a bold, muscular man. And you can't go wrong with that combination, in my view. You know, Jason Statham, thumbs up. Vin Diesel, thumbs up. Terry Crews.
Jeff Bezos does not look like I expected him to look.
No, he doesn't, does he?
Although he has an exceptionally long neck, according to the third image of him on Google Images.
Right,
we should
get back to BattleBots. This has gone.
No, I'm sending you this image first. This is amazing.
This has gone far enough.
It's just inherently hilarious.
That is a long neck.
Part man, part giraffe.
Oh dear,
Anyway,
that's a weird picture. Yeah, where were we indeed?
Talking of exceptionally long necks.
What happened? I
almost made that very dirty instead. I'm glad I didn't.
Let's not do that. Did you notice the way that the controller for Deep Six was oriented, like the transmitter?
Yes, obviously some slightly funky mixing going on there.
It's like 90 degrees.
Was it 90 or was it 45? Because I think 45 is just... I just love seeing people do that.
I mean, 45 would make the most sense in that that's like there's no mix, that there's no clever mixing going on. 90 seems just as hard to do to me as having it straight up and down.
90 seems like you made a big mistake. 45 is you did it the simplest way possible.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It looked like he was holding it at 90 degrees, but yeah, maybe he is going to the sort of corners to go forwards and backwards. I don't think it really matters with Deep Six, though. It doesn't need an enormous amount of control over that robot.
I mean, it might as well just have a go button and a stop button. I just went out. This is one of those fights where I basically don't have notes. I usually do extensive notes, and this is just a few lines outlining things that happened.
Well, there's not a lot to...
Because I don't honestly know what to say about it. I just don't want to ignore it either.
I mean, there's not a lot not a huge amount that happened. Like Nelly got stuck on the floor right at the beginning, and I think got lucky that Deep Six didn't do a ridiculous hit on them at that point. And then after that, there was just the colossal simultaneous knockout that happened, as well as the colossal hole in the floor afterwards.
Oh, and the broken light, don't forget.
Oh, and the broken light, yeah, sorry. In a short fight full of ridiculous events, yes, there was a broken light as well.
What I find interesting more than anything is that I assume Deep Six is an alternate, because their first fight against Axe Backwards was promoted as an exhibition. And they're unbeaten, but there's no, will they make the top 16? Which I think is a real shame, because I'd love to see them just thrown into the top 16, or like thrown into a last chance rumble. Would be amazing.
I mean, in the Rumble, sure, but like, what would they... I think Deep Six is too much of a wild card.
There's no such thing as too much of a wild card.
Well, I think any fight that has Deep Six is almost guaranteed to be less than a minute long.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And normally I'd have a problem with that. But the thing is, most short fights are short because one robot didn't really work, and that's frustrating. But a 1 minute fight with Deep Six in is probably going to end because something is in pieces. And that I'm okay with. So if you take a fight we're intentionally not talking about, like Yeti Rainbow, for example, one hit, robot breaks. It's kind of visually spectacular because there's smoke, but that's basically it. There's nothing particularly worthy of a replay. There's nothing particularly interesting to talk to the teams about afterwards except, oh, your robot broke, and, oh, you broke their robot. This fight gave us a good 3 minutes of genuinely fascinating replays. It was worth the build-up time in replays alone.
Was it now?
And the fact that it's an oddity in terms of an actual double KO, which means that we now finally have a robot with a TKO on its record, which we haven't had before, and that's great.
How exciting for everyone.
Actually, Quantum Blacksmith. I don't know how that gets classified.
You've said it now.
I've said it, so it's a fact. Excellent.
You've made the statement, and you shall be branded as either wrong or not wrong, depending on something.
They'll be the first robot with an uncontentious TKO on their record.
Dear. These replays really highlighted the need for the slow-mo guys to be involved in the production of this show. For me, like it was like none of their slow-mo shots are slow enough. They need slower. They need more frames.
But imagine how horribly blown out all of the lighting would be for them to do that.
What would be blown out?
Well, it would need to be more brightly lit, which means all the other cameras would be struggling.
Just turn the aperture down. It'd be fine.
Is that actually fine? I feel like that's not actually fine.
Well,
because you've then got reflections and stuff going on.
I'm sure that the clever people who do camera stuff can figure out a way to correctly expose, maybe not like the ridiculously high, like hundreds of thousands of frames per second, but maybe like 5,000 or 6,000 frames from because I feel like what they currently have is like 1,000 frames. It would be my guess, and I feel like they could probably get 7 or 8 maybe, and still have things exposed well for the other cameras.
I'm going to upset you by saying that I think the slow-mo is slow enough. For most of the hits we're looking at, all we really want to see is what got hit. We're not trying to see the little bits flying away.
You've upset me.
I agree that for the most part, slower is better. But think how much more time that would then take up in the show. It'd have to be a 3-hour broadcast.
Yeah, but they wouldn't have to repeat the same shot like 6 times for you to understand what happened. They could show it once slower, and then everyone would be able to see exactly what happened in one shot, maybe 2 to get 2 angles. Whereas I feel like
they'd show it 6 times anyway, Sam. Come on.
But like part of why they have to show 6 times with their current slow-mo is that although it's a lot slower, it's still fast enough that you have to watch it a few times to fully understand what happened.
They show a number of replays required to cover the amount of talking they have. Let's be honest here.
Yeah, they could do a single slower shot and cover how much time they need for talking. Be great.
But most of that single slower shot will have nothing happening.
It will have in this particular case it would have the contact with Nelly, and then it would have the reactions to both those things. They'd start moving away. It'd be very exciting. Then you'd get to see in brutal slow-mo the weapon on Deep Six digging into the floor, and you'd get a better sense of how far into the floor that went. That'd be great. And then maybe at that point, just as they start to sort of properly fly away, then you'd cut to your second angle there, so you can see the same thing from a different angle and maybe reveal detail that wasn't there before.
And then cut away to someone in the audience filming all of it.
And then cut away to the audience for no good reason.
King of Bots has had some slower slow-mo, and I think that's what's making me not like it. They also did some really janky bullet time for This Is Fighting Robots, which was just really badly done. Interesting, but for the most part, really badly done and jerky.
Yeah, bullet time is really hard to do.
And yet they did it anyway, saw it wasn't very good, and included it in the broadcast nonetheless.
I'm curious if the King of Bots slow-mo is actually slower, or if they're just doing frame interpolation.
I think quite possibly the latter, but it does all seem quite dark as well, which implies it's a higher frame rate. Well, it doesn't seem dark, it seems artificially brightened.
Yeah, well, I don't know, I'd have to watch to be able to see if it had any kind of frame interpolation, and we all know that that's not going to happen.
There is no reason that you will watch King of Bots, even purely to criticise it.
Nope, sorry.
I will say, by the way, it's an aside, but this season has been rough to watch.
Why are you watching it then? Why are you putting yourself through that?
Hi, Ryan Bratley, pleased to meet you.
You baffle me, you really do.
I'm watching it because I can't bear for there to be robot fights in the world that I haven't seen. That's the honest answer why.
There are robot fights in the world that you haven't seen.
And that upsets me. And I want to do something about it.
Well, some people just can't be helped, I suppose.
Nope, we can't.
What is this we? We've just established that I'm not going to watch King of Bots.
Oh, I wasn't including you in we.
Oh, okay. Just you and all the other people in the world that can't be helped.
Exactly. And I'm stalling for time here, and you know it.
Shall we talk about Whiplash versus Witch Doctor?
We've been alluding to it for a while now. I will freely admit that even in the darkest moments of this fight, I was fully rooting for Whiplash. Not just because I like them, but because I want to be right. This is another sort of installment in the story of Ryan gets annoyed at people using the Vegas live event to try and infer things about the season that aren't necessarily true, but are now turning out to probably be true. I really need Witch Doctor to crash out of the competition just for those people to have to admit that maybe, just maybe, things that happened afterwards aren't completely an indication of what happened before.
I agree that is often the case, but it doesn't change the fact that Witch Doctor has been doing well this season, and you need to stomach that.
I'm really pleased for the team. I want every robot to do well, pretty much. I want them all to get a reward for the hard work they've put in. But if they could do it without making me look stupid, that would be brilliant. No, the good news is everything I've said about Witch Doctor still makes sense, because it was held in far higher esteem than its record maybe deserved, and now its record is coming up to meet its reputation.
Everyone gather round for Doublethink with Ryan. No, in all seriousness, though, I think I do agree. I think Witch Doctor was a little bit overhyped last season, but it is living up to its name a lot better this time round. Like they have done better this time, and I am pleased for them. I think they've done very well so far, and I have to say that they made a really good choice with their front end, I think, in this fight. and both robots were driven spectacularly. I think like they both teams, both robots, really good driving, and it was. I don't feel like I have a huge amount to say about the fight in general. It was like a very entertaining fight. I really did enjoy watching both robots duke it out for a full 3 minutes there.
I think the thing that makes this fight interesting for me is the way my feeling about Witch Doctor influenced my initial enjoyment of this fight. Because doing this podcast and having to put my opinions out there properly on record does change the way I watch the show a bit, and Witch Doctor is kind of the focal point of that, where I end up rooting against them even though I like them. And in this case, I would probably always root for Whiplash anyway. But I found myself genuinely annoyed when Whiplash struggled. But re-watching it today in order to do notes for this, it is an excellent fight. And one in which Whiplash did better than I initially thought as well.
Yeah, I mean, like they because they lost their front right wheel at some point, right? And that's quite an important wheel. It means that they sort of like lost the ability to sort of push Witch Doctor around quite a lot, because if they had Witch Doctor on the front of their robot, then it that would cause their one of their back wheels to lift off the ground, and they lost a lot of their power. But despite that, they still did a really good job of just generally a really good job with their robot, even with only 3 wheels and that sort of weakness that it gives them. Like they still gave Witch Doctor a fight. It wasn't as imbalanced as I would maybe have expected it to be after that point.
And I think what it shows is that the disc working isn't actually that big a part of Whiplash's game plan.
Yeah.
I think the lifter is by far the more impactful part of the robot. They're good at doing damage with the disc almost as an overhead weapon, but apart from that, I think it's there as an item that changes the way opponents approach them in terms of, oh, do we want to go face-to-face with this? We might take damage to our front edge, which, of course, for Witch Doctor, not an issue at all. It also... I've got a bit lost in our structure here. Sorry, I don't really know where I'm going, but I feel like I'm about to take us off on a tangent. Have you got anything else you want to say?
Go for it.
So this is something that we almost accidentally discussed before we recorded, but I realised, thanks to a Reddit thread and also watching this fight back, that Matt Vasquez is controlling this entire robot on his own, which seems crazy to me. That's a lot of robot to be controlling from a single transmitter and with a single brain.
Yeah, that's pretty intense, I think.
I'm trying to work out how they even do that, because that's technically 3 different things that need controlling. Drive, weapon speed, and lifter.
Well, you could do it. You could have I don't think that their spinner weighs enough or goes fast enough to cause them significant gyroing issues. I don't think. I might be wrong on that, but I don't think so. And on that assumption, I think it's perfectly safe and reasonable for them to put the weapon, like the spinner part of their weapon, on a switch and just go, the weapon is either on or it is off. Because there's no, assuming the gyro stuff isn't an issue with it, there's no reason to have it on anything other than full speed. That I can think of anyway. So it's either on or off. And then you've got you'd have, presumably you've got like your drive on all your drive on one stick, like most people do, and then they could just have their lifter position on the throttle axis, for example.
That's annoyingly feasible.
That would be the way I would do it if I were setting up their robot.
Wow. It's killed that conversation. Thanks, Sam.
Well, so I think in terms of just like the mechanics of doing it with the transmitter, I think it's reasonably straightforward to do it. But in terms of like thinking through and actually being a human in control of all that in the heat of a fight, I think that's intense. And I can because the alternative is to obviously have one person doing the drive and one person doing the weapon. And I think there are pros and cons to both approaches. And so, like, I can sort of see, you know, if you've got one person that's doing everything, then you haven't got the, you know, wait for a good hit type sort of situations going on where you've got that communication delay and all that kind of stuff. And I think Hydra have had this kind of problem as well, where there's like a delay in communication between things, between like the person driving and the person with the weapon and stuff. And I think that happens quite a lot. And ideally, you'd want to be really well in sync with that. And I think that Witch Doctor, I think they've got one person on the drive and one person on the weapon, and I think they are quite in sync with when they're going to do things. I think that when to use Witch Doctor's weapon is possibly a bit simpler than other weapons, but you know they're in sync and it works well for them. But there is that communication delay and being able to sort of communicate clearly and quickly with each other if you've got two or more people controlling the same robot, which you don't have if you're doing everything. But then if you're doing everything and you get really caught up in driving the robot and don't quite, as demonstrated here, human brains are limited in what they can do, including clearly articulating an idea. And so I can fully expect that you might be trying to do everything and just get a little bit overwhelmed with trying to think about driving your robot well and making sure you're positioned well, and also thinking about what the weapon is doing. And I think that's more difficult when you've got a weapon that's got not only the spinner, but also when to use the flipper and the position it's in and all that kind of stuff.
This is a conversation that kind of gets continued in the next episode when Will Bales is talking about using a pistol grip controller. Which until now I'd always hated the idea of, but actually the way he explained it, they look really good. But it completely, if you're an individual, so again, thinking about building ants and beetles, a lot of people are doing that solo. It completely then limits you to a certain type of robot, because you can basically just do drive from it. I believe there are ways to do simple weapon control, but from what I understand, they're quite convoluted and not very user-friendly.
It's funny, his main reason for using it, like one of the advantages... One of the advantages that Will outlined for using a pistol grip controller was that he can go in a straight line much more easily. He just pulls the trigger and his robot goes forwards. And that kind of makes sense, but I don't think it's as hard to go forwards, like in a straight line forwards, with a sort of more traditional aeroplane controller, as he seemed to suggest. Like I think it's quite easy to move your thumb forwards without deflecting left and right. Like I don't.
And
think
that's why you're the driver and I'm not, because I find that really hard.
Yeah, maybe it's just an individual thing, but like I don't think that's too insanely difficult. And maybe that's just a long time spent playing 3D platformers on with a PlayStation controller and stuff. Like you have to be able to go forwards quite accurately with that, even without the octagonal collar thing that the GameCube controller had. I'm getting sidetracked, but like. I don't know. Maybe it's just an individual thing, but like I just want to make the point that I don't think it's quite as hard as he seemed to suggest to go forwards with any other type of controller. I would think that the bigger effect, the bigger problem with going in a straight line is more around things like grip and trim and making sure that you've got that when the motors receive the same input signal that they actually spin at the same speed. I think there's all kinds of weird little things with that are going to have a bigger effect, I would have thought, on your ability to drive in a straight line than the controller you're using. But that's just my opinion.
Bear in mind, most of my driving was done with split decision, so input and output are basically unrelated.
Yeah. In that case, you've got no hope at all of going in a straight line.
But no, we did very briefly discuss doing separate weapon operation on Hello There, didn't we? And you, I think, very quickly vetoed it, which I completely understand.
Maybe I vetoed it at the time, but like I think I'd be open to trying it. But I think I think we would both find it a challenge to communicate without just yelling at each other.
I think it'd be interesting for spectators.
Yeah,
not necessarily effective.
Why didn't you fire?
How to end a podcast in 2 easy steps.
Yeah. Build a robot together and then attempt to both control it at the same time. Maybe what we should do is split the control up a bit differently and have one of us with the right-hand side drive and one of us with the left-hand side drive, and then we need to agree on the input to make the hammer go. Like, if you fire the hammer and I don't, then the hammer just goes to halfway.
Just jolts violently. The worst thing is, these are all things that I would genuinely try for fun.
Definitely.
But we should move on, because we still have a whole other episode to go.
We certainly do. And in the next episode, we're going to start with free shipping versus Bronco. Before we get into this episode as a whole, was it a good episode? I preferred this to the one before, but the reason I'm going to say that is because I watched episode 10 in 2 sittings, and I think it took me 3 or 4 sittings to watch episode 9. And that could well just be a function of my mood and busyness as much as anything else. So I don't know if it's fair to necessarily say that 10 is clearly better than 9, but for whatever reason, I think 10 held my attention better.
I had the exact opposite. I did my quick hop through the fights before work and came away thinking it was an absolutely terrible episode. But going back through it today and looking at it, it really wasn't that bad. It was weird in that you had terribly short fights and then bizarrely long fights and not really anything in between. But for the most part, I think there's some good, memorable stuff in it.
In which episode are you talking about?
10, this is.
10, yeah. Well, I think
Funny enough, the ones we're talking about are all the long ones. What a shock.
Who saw that coming?
It's almost like I'm part of selecting them. So, free shipping Bronco, as you so kindly introduced.
Yeah, your favourite robot versus your favourite robot.
See, this is very much the opposite of the Witch Doctor experience. This is a thing I've been saying for a while happening, and this feels much better.
Yeah, I'm sort of assuming that you have lots of gleeful "I told you so"s coming with this fight, given Bronco's performance now. So, do you want to take the stage for a while?
What I think has happened with Bronco is they've lost to the reigning champion, and they've lost to a freak mechanical failure that you wouldn't reasonably expect to be repeated. So I think these two fights, certainly these two results, give us no real information on their overall quality as a competitor. I do think the loss against Bite Force is part of a bigger pattern of struggling against vertical spinners, but this fight is just a freak incident. And I'm really glad that free shipping got a win out of it, and I'm kind of glad's not really the word, but I'm not upset at the prospects of Bronco not making the top 16. But this isn't exactly the big "I told you so" Bronco is a terrible robot and always has been. Which is, just for the interest of clarity, never what I've wanted.
How very diplomatic of you.
But I am still weirdly enjoying Bronco not doing well, just because I like change in this very specific context. The rest of the time, hate change, can't handle it.
Oh dear. It was a really weird failure, wasn't it? Like the way that their weapon arm snapped was bizarre.
I don't know if they've spoken about it since. The explanation they gave post-fight of a bad batch of titanium does make a lot of sense, in terms of bad titanium weld bad, and the fact it went on the first flip as well kind of backs that up. But I don't know if this is also the arm that they took into the Bite Force fight, and maybe it took some damage from that.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I mean, like, it's not as if they tried to flip the wall or anything. Like, they weren't trying to flip something that was, for all intents and purposes, immovable. Like, it was just the weight of a normal robot is what snapped it. So something was very fundamentally wrong with the structure of that arm at that moment. And yeah, it could be bad titanium, and I'm willing to think that, you know, these guys know what they're doing. I would like to think that they would know if there was some obvious damage to their arm from a different fight. And if they say it's bad titanium, then that's good enough for me. And it's just sort of a shame that it happened in some ways. But it was also interesting to sort of see the way that they adapted to that in this fight, in that they sort of like, well, we need to go backwards and try and get, you know, and they almost went to the front hinge flipper at that point, you know, of like, we need to get under the robot to sort of like hit them from below. Yeah, they finally became a proper flipper, and that's really what we've all been waiting to see. But I thought that was quite good. That was quite good thinking. Yeah. I think it was very hard for them to execute.
And it could have worked.
Yeah, and it definitely could have worked. And it's like, I'm sort of trying to put myself in the position of, you know, controlling a robot like that in the fight. And I'm not sure that I would have thought to do that. I would have gone, oh, weapon's broken, that's it. And just kept going face first. I think it takes a certain amount of awareness to go, right, we need a change of tactic here. We're gonna reverse into them, and we're gonna try and be a front hinge flipper now. And I think that's impressive to me, that to sort of think of that. And maybe that's really really condescending. I don't know. I don't intend it to be. I am genuinely impressed by that.
It's been their game plan in the past for certain fights to go in with the wedge and act like a front hinge, but that would have been a premeditated thing. I think they've had enough fights that they can stay cool under the pressure of it.
Yeah.
But I can certainly think of scenarios that I won't expand on where I have been able to do a really specific and obvious seeming thing and not thought of it until afterwards.
Yeah,
it happens,
hard.
And it's annoying.
Yeah, nothing more irritating than realising 5 minutes later, oh, I should have done that.
It's like, oh, any idiot would have thought to do that. But unfortunately, when you're in the midst of a fight and there's a lot of adrenaline happening, you are basically an idiot.
The especially fun thing is when you think of the perfect retort to an argument 6 years after it happened.
I'm now imagining the Bronco team just running up to Gary Gin in 3 years' time going, we could have backed into you.
Oh, that would be good.
Make it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, the backing in idea was really good. The issue they came up against is that free shipping is quite good at being low. And that is really what won it for them, was just, A, the fact that Gary Gin is a very good driver, and trying to beat Gary Gin while driving backwards seems like quite a tall order.
Mm-hmm. That said, as far as driving backwards goes, I think Bronco did very well. Like, they were still in very good control of that robot. That's really good.
Again, there are certain drivers who we label as good and others who are also very good, and I think we just miss it a lot of the time. It's only in situations like that that you go, hey, these guys are actually really skillful.
Yeah, they know what they're doing. Who would have thought that many, many years of experience with this would lead to good drivers?
I mean, that opens up a much larger thing about why we define certain drivers as good that I always want to get into, but never quite know how. One of these days it'll happen.
Yeah, one for another time, I think.
We'll have it at the same time as the versioning debate.
Oh, God.
Just hang that over people's heads a little more. The real star of this show was Free Shipping's flamethrower, I suppose.
Yeah, only slightly ruined by the sound effects for it, but yeah, it was cool.
See, I didn't notice this.
Oh, dude.
I was too busy listening to the chunk sound that the flipper tries to make and the lifter makes. And someone scratching their nose also seems to make.
It's almost as if you breathe on a weapon, it makes a big chunk noise.
Can you, for the benefit of the tape, impersonate the flamethrower sound? That just sounds like the sound flamethrowers make.
I mean, I think it is a sound of a flamethrower. Like, I don't think that they're doing some ridiculously artificial thing. I think they have just dubbed the sound of a flamethrower over a flamethrower. It just seemed far louder than it should have been to me in the mix, that's all.
I'm going to have to go back and re-listen to this, because I feel like you're probably right. But I also feel like my only experience of the sound of flamethrowers is the artificial sound of flamethrowers added to an edit.
I don't know. This is another one of those things where I think I'm just more sensitive to it now that I've sort of really noticed it, and this just happened to stand out as like, I don't remember I wouldn't have thought that flamethrower would be that loud if it was done genuinely. Like, that seems like it was so loud in the mix, to my ear anyway.
I can completely imagine that being the case. My issue was more that flamethrower seems to be a lot longer than it's allowed to be. I think it's meant to be 4 foot, and that was a lot more than 4 foot.
That nearly hit the ceiling. It was insane. That is a very big flamethrower.
They were also using it right up against the wall, which you're not meant to do.
Ooh.
And the BattleBots team, I don't know if it was just in a supporters post or more generally, decided to do this really weird post of, should free shipping have been disqualified? It's like, stop trying to create drama on yourself.
But drama gets them interaction. It gives them it makes numbers on their metrics things go up, and that can only be a good thing.
1 like equals 1 BattleBot.
Oh God.
1 like equals 1 season 5. That's what I should have gone with.
1 season 5. I have nothing but season 5s from now on.
We're overrun with season 5s. Make them stop. Make them stop.
I just want 1 season 6.
But what if we get 6 season 5s and divide them by 5?
Then nothing. You still have 6 season 5s.
No, because you divide it by 5 to make a season 6. That's how math work.
That's not how that works.
Right. This is coming from the people who have written this upcoming episode as being on the 23rd on their website.
The 23rd?
The 23rd of August.
How do you do that?
The 23rd is dead. Long live the 23rd. The main thing I've learned in the last few days of looking around the BattleWatts website is that they badly need a copy editor.
Yeah. There must be some underpaid intern somewhere doing it, I suspect.
Who do we know that does a bit of writing and a bit of sub-editing and also knows how to make titles for things? Do you know a guy?
I think I might do, yeah.
Should send his CV their way and they'll be utterly underwhelmed. Any more on this fight before we tangent ourselves to death?
No, I think we're done. I think we can move on.
To pain. Lots and lots of pain. Valkyrie versus Monsoon.
How is this? I think you mean Monsoon.
not really a thing this season because Tim's got his own robot. But I appreciate the commitment.
I thought that about
Ragnarok.
halfway through that. I thought it's not this season, but I'm gonna finish.
Guys, nothing worse than questioning yourself mid-ooh. No one wants that.
But it's happened. I've said it.
So we alluded to politics earlier, didn't we?
You did, yeah. What's political about this?
Are you watching Farouk intros at the moment?
I don't think I watched it when I was doing... Oh, he mentioned Brexit, didn't he? I remember now.
Yeah, which is something that I very nearly suggested as a bingo square. Brexit/Trump reference. And I thought, no, that's going to get too many backs up. And here we are.
Here we are. That does date it quite a lot, doesn't it? Because, of course, BattleBots should be completely timeless.
Come 2060... when all the robots are floating and firing lasers at each other, we want people to look at this season and go, yeah, that's from last year.
Yeah, but those people won't be from the UK because it will have collapsed.
It will have sunk.
Oh, dear. Well.
And that wasn't the most painful thing about watching this fight.
What was the most painful thing then?
Watching Monsoon get wailed on for 3 minutes.
I didn't mind because I was just very happy for the Valkyrie team that their weapon went basically constantly for 3 minutes straight.
That was very impressive, and it was also impressive that Monsoon ran through all of the hits.
Yeah, it's sort of. I found that kind of odd. It was sort of like Valkyrie never got a good connection. I don't feel like there was lots of the spark creating scraping going on, but no huge hit. And I'm not sure if that's a function of the shape of Monsoon. Or if it's something about the way the Valkyrie's weapon works. Obviously, it's quite low, but I don't know if it's going a bit too fast, perhaps. Because I feel like they should at least be able to get a good connection on the ground scraping bit of the weapon box on Monsoon, but they never did.
Well, the initial connection they got was very good, which I'm guessing then bent it up in such a way that it just guided the bar underneath itself from then on.
Yeah, I suppose so.
I think also the geometry and the sort of, not quite the mobility, but I can't think of a better word, of Monsoon kind of made them ideally suited to not taking major damage from that weapon. Because the bar's going to come in, and it's going to hit the front of Monsoon, which is angled in such a way that it draws the bar further under.
Yeah.
And then, because there's that big pivot along the back, the whole body can almost lift out of the way.
Yeah.
It sort of wheelies up, especially if Monsoon is driving at them. That whole body wheelies up and is therefore more out of the way. So it seemed like all of the hits were basically being taken by the weapon module. The weapon module, which, according to the interview beforehand, was definitely going to stay on this time.
I mean, it didn't come clean out. Like, it was still within the confines of the robot at the end of the fight.
I think that was just due to Monsoon's lack of mobility, not giving it a chance to actually work out fully.
No. It's because it was perfectly secured to the robot, utterly incapable of being removed. It's like the UK and Europe. They can't possibly be split up.
Like the UK and Europe hanging on by a thread. Yeah, what I really enjoyed, though, was just watching the whole team enjoy being wailed on for 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Tom really does seem to be one of the people who, while very talented and very capable of building something to win fights, he values putting on a show just as much.
Yeah.
Even if putting on a show does mean being wailed on for 3 minutes, which sometimes, unfortunately, it does.
Yeah, it was a good show though. It was a good fight. Well, maybe not a good fight. I enjoyed watching this fight.
Well, I think it's also a good fight because while Monsoon wasn't doing much, it was hanging on and hanging on and hanging on in such a way that it was reasonable to think that Valkyrie might just destroy itself any second.
Yeah, I suppose so. There's always that risk of that happening when you've got so much of your robot's weight in the weapon.
The only thing that really mars it as a fight is the fact that, I can't remember where Tom said this, but he said it somewhere. That first hit was mostly caused by their radio signal cutting out and then being dead in the water for a second.
Oh.
But even that is made up for by the massive button miss from the Valkyrie team before the fight. So it's real swings and roundabouts here.
Yeah.
Do we agree with the judge's decision?
Well, you can hardly give it to Monsoon, really. Like, this is pretty cut and dry. As far as judges' decisions goes, there's not much in this, really, is there? There's not much. Sorry, that's not quite what I meant to say. But there's not The decision is obvious.
There's not much scope for disagreement. And yet here I am trying anyway.
Well, you can try, but it'll be a circular conversation that comes back to Valkyrie won because clearly Valkyrie should win.
I mean, Monsoon was quite aggressive, even without a weapon. I'd argue that they actually initiated most of the hits. And we all know that the thing on Valkyrie it's most likely to break is the weapon. So by driving into the weapon, you are really attacking the opponent at its weakest point, which is good control. Therefore, it should have been a split decision, but still gone to Valkyrie. Don't test me, Sam. Don't test me.
I mean, I think you should try and justify a Monsoon outright win, really.
It's English and therefore better. Actually, it's more British now, to be fair. She's got Sov on the team as well, so we can't really call it English anymore. It's more multicultural than that. Oh, that by the way, was one of my other favourite things about the fight, especially the pre-fight interview. Sov just weighing in an accent that I'm fairly sure 95% of American viewers won't have understood.
Yeah, not that hard to understand, though, really, is it?
I mean, it is if you're American.
Apparently, yeah.
They can barely understand groundskeeper Willie. I think we've run our course on that one, haven't we?
I think that just about wraps up Valkyrie versus Monsoon.
So we shall move on to the third judge's decision of the night.
Bite Force versus Hypershock, the world's most hyped up fight.
Was it that hyped up?
Well, maybe the world's most hyped up is a bit of an overhyping of how hyped up it was, but it felt like it was quite a hyped up fight to me.
This felt hyped up at the usual rate.
It felt to me like they were trying to sell you on the idea that Hypershock could win. Like, I feel like the impression I got is that the producers felt that people wouldn't give Hypershock a chance just on Hypershock's merits because it didn't do very well last season. And so they were trying to sort of remind you that Hypershock is quite a good robot, or at least has been in this season.
If that's what they were trying to do, then I'm not sure that getting it to drive around a bunch of tyres really achieved that. I was really hoping to see loads of other robots come in and do the same thing, but it was like, nope, just driving Hypershock around.
Right, what happened in this fight anyway?
A lot. A lot. So Paul claimed that he wasn't going to make any changes to his robot and then came in with new wedgelets.
Yeah, a minor change, but a change nonetheless.
I mean, on the scale of changes he makes, that's quite a major one.
I mean, the robot did look different as a result.
It looked weirdly different as well. You know, for such a small change, it was quite a big overall aesthetic change.
Do you think they made much of a difference in this fight, or do you think that the same thing would have happened had they just had their normal wedgelets on the front?
Hard to say. They seemed like a good idea, but I don't know whether they made a huge amount of difference. I just like that Paul kind of has, and I apologise in advance for making a football reference, the sort of Leicester City approach from a few years ago, where Leicester City, a comparatively small club, won the Premier League by basically going, here's our team, here's our formation, we're going to play like this every single week and you've got to deal with it. So while loads of other teams, they're doing a lot of scouting of the opposition, thinking, oh, they play this kind of formation, so we'll play this kind to counter it, and oh, they've got a particularly fast player in that position, so we'll put one of our less talented but particularly quick players to counter them and all of that. Instead of doing that, they just went, how about we just get really good at doing one thing? And that almost feels like what Paul has been doing with Bite Force. He's not worrying about what the opposition is good at. He's going, I'm the big dog here. You adapt to me.
Yeah.
And I really love the earned confidence with which he does that.
Yeah. Do you think that he's having to work harder this year than previous years, or is it just sort of like happened to have got? Or do you think that the two robots so far that have given him a real fight have been a bit lucky there, or do you think that people are building better robots now than they were before? That sounds. I haven't phrased that very well.
Do you mean that the standard of opposition is constantly improving and he has to improve to stay on top?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's going to be true for every competitor every time. I think he specifically has probably been worked harder this year just by virtue of taking damage from fights more often.
Yeah.
So, you know, he took damage in this one, he took damage from the Yeti fight. Although I suppose last season he was making upgrades as he went, which means that if we think about this question in its purest form in terms of hours spent working on the machine, it might be even. But yeah, I think it's definitely being tested more. This is the second fight where we've seen it bleed.
I think it's been really interesting because I feel like a little while ago, I can't remember if this was on a recording or not, but like I was having a conversation with you or someone about, what would it take to beat Bite Force? Like, what could possibly beat Bite Force?
I mean, honestly, who else are you going to have that conversation with, Sam?
Well, I might have been talking to Mike or someone, but like it's I have other friends. But like we've seen twice now that the robots can really give it a fight, like a proper hard fight. Like Bite Force had its drive jam up quite early on in this fight, and it was limping for the majority of the fight. It was not like the clear, plain sailing, easy win that it normally seems to get. It had to work quite hard, and as twice that's happened now.
And yet somehow he still comes through, and he's come through that situation twice in the exact same way.
Yeah, phasing through there is his opponent.
Yeah. An opponent gets under him or gets sort of wedged on him somehow, pushes him into the wall, and suddenly, as soon as they hit the wall, he sent them flying, and it doesn't make physical sense.
I think I get it a little bit more with this hit actually than I do with how it happened with Yeti. That still makes no sense to me. But in this one, I think in the slow-mo you can see that Hypershock drives Bite Force into the wall and then bounces back slightly, and it's just enough for the wedgelets to go back down onto the floor. And then obviously Hypershock drives into it and is no longer winning the ground clearance battle because Bite Force always wins it, basically. And then he's sent flying. Yeah,
I think the bounciness of Hypershock kind of did it in there. I think a lot of robots, if they push it into the wall, they don't bounce back that far.
Yeah.
And maybe that pesky pistol grip is what made him go forwards again afterwards in that lovely straight line. Oh, Will, what have you done to yourself?
Oh, dear.
If only you hadn't been such a pistol grip hipster, which I now assume is a thing. Pistol gripster. Missed an opportunity there.
Oh, that's awful.
But no, continuing along the theme of Bite Force takes damage, Hypershock has got 2, 3, maybe even 4 potentially very decisive hits on them. So while inverted, they've hit that weapon bulkhead and done some big damage to that. They've got him once or twice on the front left corner and done big damage there. The only thing I can't work out is how they actually damaged the right side drive, because that's an area they didn't seem to hit.
I don't know. I wonder if maybe the frame twisted, or because they got under Bite Force at some point as well. I wonder if they did some kind of damage under there that affected the right hand side drive.
As I recall, that was on the left hand side and after the issue had already sort of taken place. My assumption is that something got drawn into the drive system and just clogged it up, because it did seem to sort itself out later. But either way, that's now the second time they've had that kind of drive problem.
That's their weakness. They can be beaten. It's been shown.
What you needed is lots of debris.
What you need is for Deep Six to go and do a few fights and put some nice big holes in the floor and then wait for Bite Force to get caught up on that.
Yeah, because the floor needs more help in incapacitating bots.
Well, I think it needs more help with incapacitating Bite Force, which seems to have been largely unaffected by the floor somehow.
I honestly want to say it's good design, but what would I know? What would I know?
Like Bite Force phasing through more stuff where it's both simultaneously really low to the ground and yet also completely unaffected by the unevenness of the ground.
Schrodinger's wedge.
It's the perfect robot.
It's funny you mentioned this idea of who would beat Bite Force, because there are a couple of robots that you look at and go, actually, I think they'd have a really good chance. So a rematch with Huge, I think, could be very interesting, because Huge managed to take out the weapon last time. There's no reason to think they couldn't do it again, especially if they go in with this sort of similar strategy of running the bar backwards. I think a robot like Shatter would have a chance as well, because Paul's going to struggle to get hits on the softer parts. I think the ablative armour could be really valuable, and they've got an overhead weapon, which has the potential to, again, sort of, attack the weapon mechanism, or just get some good hits on that very flat top, which presumably has quite a lot of important stuff quite close to the surface.
Yeah, that would be an amazing fight to see, Shatter versus Bite Force. I'd love to see that.
Apart from that, it's really hard to come up with any more of a list of robots you really see having a good chance.
See, I think it'd be interesting to put Bite Force against something like, maybe not Mammoth specifically, but, one of those like weird, wacky robots that I think could actually trip Bite Force up in a weird way.
I mean, I'd argue that Huge and Shatter both kind of fall into that bracket.
Huge sort of. Shatter, I think, less so. I think the other one that would be quite funny would be to put them against Deep Six.
Oh, I mean, anything against Deep Six is going to be good. To defend my position on Shatter for a second, this isn't me going, oh, they're a joke robot, because I won't do that for anyone. It's more a case of they have a set of attributes that are essentially unique. That's why I put them in that kind of quirky category. It doesn't mean that they're not competitive. It doesn't mean that they're not trying to build something great. It is that group of robots that people have less of a plan for.
Yeah, they're more non-standard than something like Beta.
Yeah. Which would also be a very good fight for Bite Force, by the way. Any hammer against Bite Force I'd be interested in seeing.
Just put anything against Bite Force. Just anything and everything, and keep going until we find something that can beat Bite Force.
Anything that doesn't need to be low to the ground to be effective. That's what you want to see.
Yeah.
So Bite Force Cobalt, for example, really bad matchup for Cobalt, I'd expect. Even though they're a very strong competitor.
Yeah, but I'd like to see that fight as well.
I mean, yeah, it would be chaos either way. So yeah, that's Bite Force continuing to win a lot of fights.
Shockedface.jpg.
Before we wrap this up, if you think this episode is going to be out in time, I just want to really quickly talk about the episode we have coming up.
I mean, if by coming up you mean later today. As far as the people listening are concerned, then sure.
That's assuming that they listen on launch as well, but...
Yeah.
It's just absolutely mad in every single fight. First of all, it's an episode where Tombstone isn't a main event. And that means you know it's going to be good already. Tombstone Gruff, amazing matchup. Just to make sense, it's the Tombstone Duck of this season. Duck Quantum, the ritual feeding of Duck to a non-spinner that has to happen once a season. Blacksmith versus Captain Shredderator. Blacksmith gets another damaging opponent to see what'll happen. Bombshell versus Lockjaw, the only weak fight of the episode, and even that could turn out to be quite good. Endgame Cobalt, which could be kind of another Death Roll versus Endgame kind of situation. Ribot Sawblaze, which means we're going to get to see the frog destroyed. And then as a main event, Rotator versus Death Roll. If you showed this to me at the start of the season, it probably wouldn't be that exciting. But pretty much all of these are robots that have either performed really well or underperformed quite badly. And I'm excited for every single one of these fights.
Do you want to have a go at predicting the outcome of Blacksmith versus Captain Shredderator?
I mean, if we're doing predictions, we're doing the whole card, Sam.
You want to do the whole card. Right, should we start with Duck versus Quantum then?
Head says Duck, heart says Quantum.
I think Quantum will get it.
I kind of do as well, but I think that's me romanticising it.
I feel like Quantum should get it.
It should, but Duck.
Yeah, but like...
Duck is 5 individual systems. Every single wheel is its own battery, motor, receiver setup. And presumably an ESC as well.
I'm not expecting Quantum to win by knockout. I think killing Duck with a crusher is going to be very hard, but this is one of the situations where this is probably going to go 3 minutes, and I would expect that in that time Quantum is going to do more damage, and consequently Quantum is going to win.
I can just see Quantum breaking down. Oh, I just don't know, and that's why I'm so excited to see it. There are so many permutations of that fight.
Okay. Blacksmith versus Captain Shredderator then.
I mean, Blacksmith all the way.
So this is interesting because I think last time when we were talking about Blacksmith, I sort of said I think Blacksmith will make most fights last 3 minutes and then lose the judge's decision. But I think that Captain Shredderator will break itself before that happens.
It's like, you don't want it to happen, but if you're doing predictions, you've got to go with the high percentage choice. And unfortunately, that is Captain Shredderator at some point breaking down.
Yeah.
Although, again, this is later in the season. They've had a chance to work on things. Maybe this is the one that's different, and I really hope it is.
Yeah, we shall see. Bombshell versus Lockjaw.
Lockjaw. I'm not stupid.
Yeah, I think Lockjaw
I've seen BattleBots before.
Is the obvious choice there. Tombstone versus Gruff then.
I mean, it's Tombstone, but it's going to be good. Gruff could make it last. Gruff could make a fight out of it, but I don't quite see anything more.
The thing is, if Tombstone's weapon breaks, Gruff is going to win.
But if Tombstone's weapon breaks, it will be after it's done some significant damage to Gruff first.
Yeah.
It does depend on how much of a rebuild they've had to do as well, but...
Yeah. I think that Gruff stands more of a chance of winning that fight than Duck does.
Well, Duck has no chance of winning it because it's not in that fight.
Yeah, all right, Mr. Pedantic Difficult. Gruff stands more of a chance of beating Tombstone than Duck does stand a chance of beating Tombstone.
Okay, so you're not saying more of a chance than Duck has of beating Quantum. Okay.
No. Clearly that's not what I'm saying, Mr. being facetious and irritating for no reason.
That was actually what I assumed you were saying. It's it's an equally direct comparison in the context of what we're talking about. Mr. Assume Ryan's being pedantic.
That's a perfectly valid assumption. I've known you for long enough.
Mr. Hear Hooves say horses over there.
Yeah. Endgame versus Cobalt.
Endgame cheesy win.
You think?
I really think, yeah.
That would make me so sad because Cobalt should win that. I think Cobalt's going to win that. Maybe this isn't the smart bet, but I don't think Endgame is going to win that.
This is just my eternal pessimism. Although either way, I feel like I win. Either English Robot I really like wins, or Robot I'm still stubbornly calling a bit of a dark horse wins.
Dark horse. And then Ribbot versus Sawblaze.
Now, before we go into a result, what weapon will Ribbot use?
What are their choices?
So they have a vert, they have an undercutter, they have a lifter module, I believe, and they might also have some kind of mid-cutter at the top of a wedge that I think I've seen, but I might be very wrong.
I'd go with the undercutter in that situation.
Same.
I think, yeah, because I think you want to do as much damage to the front end of Sawblaze as you can.
Yeah, you want to make it undesirable for them to go head on with you.
Yeah.
In which case, I imagine Sawblaze using the saw, which I think could be hilarious with the foam.
Yeah, that would be funny.
They have a flamethrower on the arm as well. They could just burn all the foam. That would be awesome.
Good proper Deator moment. I think that if Ribbot uses the undercutter, I think that the big disc spinner thing on Sawblaze is a better choice because it means that they, similar to how Monsoon's kind of like ends up gliding over the undercutter, I think that would more easily happen with Sawblaze if it was less balanced.
If they were using the undercutter, then I imagine Sawblaze would use their heavy wedge, which I think stops them using the blade.
Yeah. So many configuration options.
I'm still kind of potentially seeing Ribbot for it. Again, that's probably wishful thinking, but I've been so impressed by them.
Yeah, they are no doubt an impressive robot, but I think the smart money is Sawblaze still.
I just want them both to win. That's the problem. And then finally, Rotator versus Death Roll. Death Roll with the opportunity to be the first 4-0 robot.
I have no idea. I just don't know. I kind of want to say Death Roll, but Rotator is really good as well.
It's just uncallable. I want to say Death Roll based entirely on their durability so far.
I could go either way, but then, Rotator is no slouch in terms of durability.
Oh, no, not at all.
It could go either way so easily.
There's also lots of configurations they could come in with, and this is why this is a great card. Any other one from the season, I think we'd have gone through this and just kind of gone, this one, this one, this one, this one. So many of these are so close. They've all got that potential to produce something brilliant, and they might not follow through on it, but I'm so excited. And I'm not going to be able to watch it live. I'm sorry. We might end up watching this together, If I'm going to be at yours on Saturday, I think we should. Yeah, it could happen. Oh, we could do a live reactions recording. We could. I don't know why we would, but we could. We certainly could. Well, bonus episode of Spinnerproof where we just do live reactions to an episode. We can finally use that YouTube channel we got going on. Don't tell anyone about that. We've mentioned it enough by now. That secret YouTube channel that will clearly not get us into trouble. That animal cruelty YouTube channel. Right. Do you want to wrap this up with a outro? You can find the show notes for this episode at spinnerproof.com/episode/55. And there you can find links to all the stuff we've been talking about today. You can also find a link to our Twitter at Spinnerproof, where you can tweet to us pictures of handsome, muscular men. Well, that stays. I am going to regret that. God, it'd be really awkward if I just start sending you photos of me. God. Just fully clothed, handsome, muscular men. I mean, if we're ever going to get tweets, it'll be this time. Oh, God, what have I done? So, World's Fastest After Show. I, last week, took the opportunity I had at work to do a bunch of 1-hour sessions with the kids on robot fighting, which was basically 30 minutes of me showing them videos and 10 minutes of me getting them to draw their own designs Now, bear in mind, these are groups of 8 to 12-year-olds, sort of grouped into 8 to 10 groups and 11 and 12 groups. And it was really weird because I did 6 groups over the week. 3 of them completely grabbed hold of it and loved it. And the other 3, I had 80% of the group not listening and like 3 of them enthralled. And I cannot for the life of me find a pattern in how that went. It wasn't age groups that were the same. Nothing. I delivered the session exactly the same each time. And for some reason, some of them latched onto it and got it and loved it, and the others just didn't.
Well, you know, you like what you like, and that's what it comes down to. I think people have their things that they're interested in and the things that they're not.
It's good. I think there was almost a bit of peer pressure in some cases where once there are 4 or 5 people loving it, everyone kind of gets drawn along.
Yeah.
And when there's only a couple, people sort of are then trying to work out if it's cool to like this or not.
Yeah, do they have? I assume at that age, it's all about what the cool people are doing and stuff. And I think if you don't get the cool people on board, then you've lost the entire class.
Exactly, and that's kind of how it was. But the kids I had who really got into it, they really got into it. I had a few who had seen BattleBots or King of Bots, and in one case, a Russian kid who'd been to a Russian live event.
Oh, nice.
And he was like putting his hand up going, I bet you never heard of a robot called Weber. And I was like, well, have I got news for you, son. 2-wheel drive pneumatic flipper, about 70 kilos, grossly underweight for heavyweights, but, you know, we'll take it.
Are you able to share any of the designs the kids came up with?
So yeah, I have loads of pictures of designs that they came up with, which I kind of want to work out what to do with them. I was hoping that they might come up with something sensible that I could try and make as an ant weight, but that did not happen.
You should try to steal ideas from children.
I thought it'd be really cool to make a kid's design real, and then they all designed insane stuff. Because my whole approach was show them lots of fights, show them how different people are making robots that work, and then at the end, just tell them the bare minimum of the rules that I have to. Because I didn't want to have loads of ideas and then go, you can't do this, this, and this. Sorry. So I kind of just gave them the bare minimum, didn't talk about too much of what they couldn't do. Told them the basics in terms of, you know, no nets or glue or anything like that, no bombs, no guns. But I didn't really try and lead them towards what a good design is. So what I have is about 40 pages of A4 in my hand of robots which, as a minimum, have 4 weapons. They had this... It was really interesting to see, and this was a pattern that I spotted early and decided not to do anything about. They all had this real obsession with creating a robot that was ready for every situation.
Yeah, that makes sense.
When my session was inevitably overrunning and I had 6 kids all running up trying to show me their idea and explain it all, I had to sit through... I had the pleasure of sitting through like a 5-minute explanation of exactly how it was going to deal with an attack from every single angle. So it's like, so here's my robot, it's a flipper on the front, and if someone tries to attack from the side, there are spikes, and if they try to attack from the back, there's a lot of saws. And if it gets flipped over, it becomes a hovercraft. Just all these kinds of crazy ideas. To the point where one of them literally just called their robot the Prepared Robot.
The Prepared Robot. Amazing.
Prepared for anything. Which basically just means covering it in tiny little spinners. Something they also loved was the idea of multi-bots.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even show them any multi-bots. I just showed them... Hydra Warhawk was one of the fights I showed them, and they immediately picked up on Warstop. Same with Shaman in Witch Doctor versus Red Devil. And kids dig mini-bots. Mini-bots are crack to them.
I wonder why that is.
But the best thing is, almost all of them that designed a multi-bot designed a Sam Hutchins-style original rules clusterbot.
That is because that is a clusterbot.
But again, no guidance towards that. That was just their instinct of how it should be.
This is proof to me...
This thing that starts together as one.
Proof to me that is the purest form of a multibot. That is the correct approach to multibot design, you know? If that's the natural instinct of unbiased children, then clearly that's the way to go.
Yeah, I thought you'd be sustained by that a while, that news. They also loved fire, by the way. Fire was really important to them. And basically every robot they've made is in some way grossly top-heavy.
I feel like what we're learning is that I am a big child.
You say learning as if we didn't already know that.
Well, it's hammering it home, you know?
So I'm just looking through these and realising that children have weirdly different ideas on how large a drawing needs to be. There's like all these tiny little things, and then one that's just the whole page of guns.
Yeah, whole page.
Oh, and one of them accidentally made huge as well.
Nice.
But yeah, it was a lot of fun doing that. And a sort of weirdly eye-opening experience in terms of what this sport looks like to a newcomer. And it turns out the word robot is quite problematic. When you tell kids robot combat, this is something I did at the start of the session. I got them to kind of close their eyes and get a picture in their head when I said the words robot combat because I wanted to know what they were seeing.
I bet they think of like mechs and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. That's what they were seeing.
Yeah.
And I think for most of them, the reality was more fun than that, which was really pleasing to see.
Yeah, nice.
But yeah, I think I still have it. I will put in the show notes the list of fights that I decided to show them, because that selection was quite heavily influenced by the conversations we've had about fights to show beginners. But there are a few specific places where I really deviated from a lot of what we said, but just because I was there to explain stuff.
Cool.
After show done.
After show done. Bye.